Hi everyone, welcome to the channel. I've been asked a few times now to film a short clip for a video on somebody else's channel, and I always like to say yes because it goes both ways in supporting the community, and it's always nice to get your recommendations out in front of a potentially new audience. So I thought it was my turn to invite a few people to come along and give some recommendations to you guys, my lovely viewers. Now normally these videos will follow a theme, whether it's the favourite book of the year or best series of all time or something along those lines. I thought I'd be a little bit different though. Without telling any of them, I gave each of my guests a different question to provide a recommendation for, and where possible that recommendation will fit in with what is essentially their speciality. So let's go and see how they got on.
Hey everyone, my name is Patrick from the channel Patrick Ryan, and Dom asked me to come on here and recommend an audiobook. Now I listen to over 100 audiobooks a year, so there's a lot to choose from. But knowing how much he supports the self-pub community, I had to go with His Ragged Company by Rance D. Dennon, narrated by John Perhala. Now His Ragged Company is a fantasy western that I can promise you is like nothing you've read before. It's told from the point of view of Elias Faust, or at least he's the main character. And he is the marshal of the small town Black Peak in Texas. Now, there are a lot of fantastical things happening in Black Peak. Faust is not one of them. He's just a regular guy, just like you and I. Maybe more stubborn than most, but besides that, there's nothing special about him. And he's seeing these fantastical things happen, but not being part of the world. He doesn't realize that there's some type of magic or anything out of the ordinary. So he kind of overlooks them and keeps overlooking them for about the first half of the book. And then eventually he can't not see the fantastical world, and all of the fantasy elements just come crashing down like a tidal wave. And John Perhala's narration of this, it brings every character to life and really transports you to the town of Black Peak. So I hope you check it out.
Hey everyone, I'm Bookborn, and my recommendation for a fantasy novel that will make you think is The Paper Menagerie by Ken Liu. Now, this is a short story collection, and it blends some stories that are fantasy, some stories are sci-fi, and some stories are more magical realism. But what I love about this collection is that, one, it's beautifully written, and two, it was extremely thought-provoking, especially because Liu uses very important and sometimes unknown parts of Chinese history to influence the stories he writes. And at the end, he always cites sources for where you can learn more about the actual historical events, which I loved. I love to see how people make sense of things that happen in history by using fantasy and magic and sci-fi. And also, because I'm sure most of you watching are slightly broken like me, the fact that I say this is an emotionally devastating collection probably will make you more interested in reading it. I hope you like it, and happy reading.
Hey everybody, my name is Mel, and I am a booktuber that reads a lot of fantasy, indie fantasy, science fiction, and horror. And Dom has asked me to give you guys my recommendation for favorite magical animal companion. And this was a little bit tough because I had a couple of different options, but I think I'm gonna have to go with Mephi from The Bone Shard Daughter. This series is one that is a really cool concept, really cool magic system, but Mephi definitely stole the show for me in this first book. Mephi is a type of cat water-like creature that really adds a lot to the story. He's not just a thrown in there animal companion. He really has a full role in the story, and I just love the friendship and the way that that character and companion develops. I think that this species is really cool, and they're just so freaking cute. Like, they're adorable, and Mephi is absolutely adorable. So highly encourage you to check out The Bone Shard Daughter for a little dose of Mephi.
G'day team, my name's Chris and I'm from the channel A Fictional Escapist, a channel where we celebrate indie and self-published authors, particularly within the sci-fi and fantasy genres. Thank you, Dom, for having me on today to recommend a great self-published series, and that would be The World of Lunaria by L.L. McRae. If you like a series that has enough to sink your teeth into but has more on the way to keep you excited, not only that, but this series has a lot of classical fantasy elements with a modern twist. We have got dragons, we have got sky pirates and airships if you like a bit of that steampunk vibe. We've got shapeshifters, we have got some interesting politics, some sibling rivalries, and just a group of people trying to find themselves throughout a huge world. I have had such a fun time in the world of Lunaria so far, and I can't wait to continue on with the series, and knowing that there's 2 more books in the works has me really excited. That's my recommendation. Thank you again, Dom, for having me on the channel for this recommendation, and thank you for being such a good friend to the self-pub and indie community.
Hey Dom, Andrews, Wizard Reads here, and thanks for asking me to pick a book that has an interesting setting. For me, the one that instantly comes to mind is Debunked Terravenium Chronicles, Book 1 by Dito Abbott. And for me, this kind of takes place on Earth, but in like a pocket dimension that is separated via something called the Divide. And in order to get through the Divide, you need like this crazy electrical suit. And it's very perilous to get through the Divide, but once you get through the Divide, you are treated to this absolutely zany, interesting world. We've got floating cities / islands of like mad warrior librarians. You've got a city full of crazy mad scientists. You've got just all sorts of geysers. You've got contrivance. There's just so many interesting locations in this world. It's got Douglas Adams feel with just a sprinkling of Terry Pratchett. I don't think I could possibly submit something that is just more intriguing in setting than Debunked.
Hi Dom, thank you so much for the invitation. So this is for the topic of my favorite complex and also, let's say, a rewarding fantasy series. For this, my answer will be a cliche, but there is no other answer for this one other than Malazan, Book of the Fallen by Steven Erikson. It is incredibly complex, the most complex and massive in scope fantasy series of novels that I've read. But more importantly, this is incredibly rewarding. It is filled with extremely intricate lore, and this is one of those series where you do a reread and you will still find something new. Always. And yes, Malazan, Book of the Fallen by Steven Erikson is one of my favorite fantasy series of all time.
Hey Dom, thanks so much for having us on. And so yeah, we're really looking forward to talking about these books. But first off, we are the Brothers Gwyn. I have a side channel called William Gwyn, but the main one is the Brothers Gwyn. I'm Will, and this is my brother Ed.
Hello.
And yeah, you've asked us to give a recommendation to those who love historical fiction, as we do. And so Ed,
and what fantasy books would you like to read if you enjoyed historical fiction? I'm going to start off with David Gemmell's Sword in the Storm. This is essentially Caesar's Gallic Wars, but set within a fantasy world. David Gemmell writes heroes like no one else, and I love the way that he crafts this kind of Celtic-inspired world against the armies of stone, aka the Romans. And I love, love, love this series of the Regante.
it's a great blend between modern and contemporary, classical fantasy.
It's
and
everything we love about the genre.
Exactly, and I have historical fantasy, which feels a bit cheating, but as we have two Rex, it's alright. And this is The Children of Gods and Fighting Men by Shauna Lawless. So set in the late 10th century in Ireland. It's got fantastical elements, mythological elements from Irish mythology, and it's set in Ireland, and it's kind of the blend between the conflict between the Irish inhabitants and the Viking settlers. And so yeah, it's pretty awesome. But Dom, thanks so much again for having us on, and hopefully some people pick this up. Truth and Courage.
Truth and Courage, The Brothers Gwyn.
The Brothers Gwyn.
What up, nerds? My name is Leslie Smith from the channel The Nerdy Narrative. The dark fantasy series I would like to recommend to you today is The Book of Thrice Dead by Joseph Sell. Currently, at time of filming, I am only halfway through this series, but book 3 just became my favorite book of the series and by this author, and I've read 7 or 8 books by the author so far. The Book of Thrice Dead is a 6-part multiverse apocalypse. It uniquely blends science fiction, fantasy, and horror. Think of it as Stephen King's Dark Tower series meets Clive Barker's The Great and Secret Show. On the tales of a nuclear apocalypse, the harbingers of the end times arrive to the city of lost souls. The multiverse is ending, and only villains can stop it.
Hi, my name's Owen Edwards from Owen Edwards Book Reviews. I deal with classic sci-fi and fantasy and Dungeons and Dragons, and I'm recommending to you today, Dom's asked me to recommend a classic fantasy, Fafhrd and the Grey Mouser, or the Lankmar series. There are 7 novels in this series. I've got it in 2 bind-ups. Fafhrd is a northern barbarian. The Mouser is an ex-wizard's apprentice, and they fall in together and go on many adventures, thieving adventures, heroic adventures, political adventures, sometimes just disaster-based adventures. The books are funny, they are witty, they're an inspiration for Terry Pratchett, but they're also full of pathos and friendship and very, very good daring-do and action. If I had to recommend one book of the 7, if you're wondering, well, I'd love to do that, but can I just read one of them? I'd try Swords Against Death, just over 200 pages in this, which is where it all really got started. If you would like to know more about what I think about classic sci-fi and fantasy, I'll see you on my channel. Thanks.
Hi Dom, thanks for asking me to be a part of this video. I'm Covers with Cassidy to anyone who doesn't know me. Dom asked me to give a recommendation for my favorite military fantasy. I decided to go with Legacy of Ash by Matthew Ward, which really means I need to continue on in this series since I'm calling it my favorite, but it's just so chunky. It's scary. This series follows 3 characters. We follow Jossary and Celine, who are children of the rebellion. Their mother was actually the ruler of the rebellion, and now they are political prisoners at war when their mother is killed. And we also follow Victor, who is actually the soldier who killed their mother. These 3 characters have very different roles in society, in what's happening. They have very different beliefs in the war going on, in the politics and everything like that, which is something I just really like about this series. Something I like about military fantasy in general is just being able to see the good and the bad of war on each side, because both sides are never good and both sides are never bad. There's always smaller moments and stuff that happen. It's a lot more complicated and it's a lot more brutal. I also really love the battle scenes in this. There is about 100 to 150 page battle scene that I think is beautifully done. There's so much character development during that scene. It feels like the perfect spot in the story. I loved it so much. I just truly think that this deserves more love. I feel like not a lot of people talk about it and not a lot of people read it. Maybe because it's long, and I will say the first 200 pages take a little bit of work to get through, but if you're willing to persevere through it, it's remarkable. So definitely pick up Legacy of Ash.
Hi, I'm Nikki, the Obsessive Bookseller. I run a BookTube channel and my focus is science fiction fantasy. Urban fantasy is definitely my favorite subgenre, and I have tried so many books over the years, and a set of authors always seems to creep their way to the top of my list, and that's Alona Andrews. This is a husband and wife writing duo, which I think for the urban fantasy genre adds a lot of balance because you get some of the feminine and masculine aspects to their storytelling, and so there's a little bit for everyone in each of their books. I love their Kate Daniels series. It starts with Magic Bites, and I gotta say, that first book did not win me over. It was a 2-star, like, meh, I really don't think I'm going to continue, but enough people who also read a lot of the other authors that I love, like Patricia Briggs, Kim Harrison, Jim Butcher, came out of the woodworks to tell me that I need to keep reading because it gets amazing. And they were right. The first book was a dud, the second book was pretty dang good, and the third one remains one of my all-time favorite books to this day. So if you can make it past Magic Bites, you are in for a series that is full of such rich world building, awesome characters, a lot of fun moments, and to boot, there are a bunch of side stories and novellas that really add to the experience. And then if you make it to the end, there are a bunch of spin-off series that are just absolutely superb. Don't let the covers scare you off. And that's my pick. Thank you so much, Dom, for inviting me to participate.
Hello, I'm Nico from Nico's Book Reviews, a channel where I read all things epic, especially epic fantasy, and when I think about an underrated epic fantasy, I of course have to go with the Crown of Stars series by Kate Elliott. This is a 7-book series. I have the first 2 here, King's Dragon and Prince of Dogs, and this is truly everything epic. This series has strong characters, a gritty medieval feel, fantastic world building, and great plot. A little bit of the best of both worlds with some characters in the style of Hobb, kind of feels similar to Martin's A Song of Ice and Fire, and world building, dare I say it, on the scale nearly of Jordan, with ever increasing the depth of the world. Here we have a lost people sundered from the earth thousands of years ago through magical means, magic using starlight and stones, fantasy creatures of all types, and all kinds of politics and plots that have bigger stakes than it may first appear.
Hey Dom, Matt's here from Matt's Fantasy Book Reviews, and my most epic fantasy series of all time is an easy one. It has to be Malazan. It's by far the grandest, biggest scope out of anything in fantasy, and it's what I think about every time that I just hear the word epic. Not even just fantasy, just hearing the word epic makes me think about Malazan. It's got the biggest world that's ever been able to possibly be conceived. I mean, many continents big, and it feels full. The conflict that's happening is not just this traditional, the world is ending, I gotta be the good versus evil stopping things. It's so much richer
and deeper and epic. It's got the greatest different characters that have ever been in a series. Hundreds upon hundreds of point of views. Yes, I said that right. It's got like 1,000 named characters in the book. It just doesn't get more epic than Malazan.
Hi, I'm Abby from the channel Abby Salter, and my fantasy romance or fantasy with a romantic plotline recommendation is Daughter of the Forest by Juliette Marillier. This definitely falls under the fantasy with a romantic plotline in it. This is the start of the Seven Waters trilogy, although this can read by itself. In this, we're following a main character, Saoirse, and at the beginning of the book, her brothers have been cursed to turn into swans, and she is tasked with trying to free them. It is set in rural Ireland during the medieval times, and I adored this. I adored Saoirse as our main character and the trials and tribulations that she goes through as she tries to free her brothers. It is based on a fairy tale, mixes elements of romance and legends and magic, and there is definitely a romance in here between Saoirse and another main character, which I was really rooting for. Their romance was very, very cute and endearing, and I spent the whole book really, really rooting for Saoirse. So I'd really, really recommend this if you're after a fairy tale retelling with lots and lots of atmosphere and magic and a romance that you are really going to root for. Thank you, Dom, for having me on to gush about one of my favourite books and the romance within it.
Hey there, my name is Megan, and here are two of my favorite YA fantasy series. The first one is Three Dark Crowns by Kendar Blake, and we have three sisters in this series that are all vying for a single throne, and they have to kill each other off until there's one survivor. One is an elemental, one is a naturalist, and one is a poisoner. This series is dark and gritty, and really, you don't know which queen is going to eventually survive. It will keep you guessing, so I highly recommend this book. It also has a really, really epic fantasy type feel to it. Then we have the Raven Boys. If you like male friendships, if you like a group of motherly, sisterly type characters that are all psychics, if you like romance, if you like a modern day setting that includes a private school, then you will love the Raven Boys. The series also has a magical forest. Things are not always as they appear, and the goal of these boys is to try to raise a dead king from the grave. Can't recommend the Raven Boys enough.
Hi, my name is Kayla, and my channel is called Kay's Hidden Shelf. I read a lot of fantasy, some sci-fi, and other genres thrown in. Thank you so much, Dom, for having me, and my recommendation for a palate cleanser is Wingriff. This is a cozy fantasy magazine series. In particular, I'm holding volume 1. Within each volume, you will find a collection of cozy fantasy short stories from a variety of authors. The great thing being that there are 9 short stories here, all contained within 150 pages. You can read 1, 2, or 3 short stories, or just sit and binge the whole thing. And it gives you a variety of stories within this, as every story is so different from the characters, the circumstances, and the worlds that we meet, with many themes being explored from family, friendship, romance, adventure, and change. You'll also find stories that have dragons, travel, unique magic, fairies, dwarves, along with found family and the mysteries behind legends, all packed into incredible short stories where the authors managed to accomplish a lot in such a short page count. I hope you enjoy it, and happy reading.
Hey friends, it's Tori over at the channel Tori Talks here on BookTube, and I am going to take this opportunity to recommend a series that has one of my favorite magic systems I think I've read in quite a long time. Now, I'm the type of person where magic systems are cool, but it doesn't really make or break a series for me. That's kind of a secondary issue. So this series, when I tell you that it stood out, I loved it, and it was one of my favorite elements of the series, you know it's gotta be good. And I'm sure it will shock everyone that the series that I'm going to hold up here is The Mortal Techniques by Rob J. Hayes. This series, once again, is an incredible Asian-inspired wuxia fantasy series with vengeful spirits and unique characters. Each one of them is a standalone, and the magic system in this series is so cool. It reminds me very much of old shonen animes and old martial arts movies. Everyone has different techniques that they can use, and the sky is really the limit. But each one is incredibly well thought out, incredibly well written. The fight scenes are glorious. I love it so much. It's so interesting, and it just really complements the story that's being told and the world that it takes place in, rather than taking anything away from it. Once again, here I am recommending that you should read the Mortal Technique series by Rob J. Hayes, because it's one of my new favorite fantasy series of all time, and it's amazing, and the magic system is great. If you decide to pick these up, I hope you have a great time with them.
Hi Dom, I hope you're having a great start to your reading year, and I hope to make it just a little bit better with some science fiction. I know you're a fan of great pacing and comedy, as well as action and characters. So I've decided to recommend for you Sea of Rust by C. Robert Cargill. Humankind is extinct. Now the world is controlled by one-world intelligences that have assimilated the minds of millions of robots. But not all robots are willing to cede their individuality, and Brittle is one of the holdouts. Brittle has to evade capture long enough to find rare parts to make repairs. But as their CPU deteriorates, all their old memories resurface. I found this book to be a thoroughly entertaining and cinematic reading experience with some pretty cool sci-fi concepts. I also thought it delved into some rather heavy themes in a harsh post-apocalyptic setting. I think it does a really good job of balancing two different timelines, as well as being under 400 pages, and it has robots. I hope you enjoy it, my friend.
So I'd just like to say a big thank you to everyone who provided a recommendation for this video. I really appreciate it, and I hope you guys watching this have picked up some new titles to take a look at as a result. I'm going to leave links below this video to all of the lovely people you've seen today. If you haven't done so already, go and check out their channels, watch some of their videos, and if you like the content they're producing, subscribe so you can see more. While you're down there, of course, if you haven't done already, you can also subscribe to me if you wish to. I'll hopefully see you in the next video soon regardless. Until then, as always, take care of yourselves, read some good books. Bye for now.